For months now, the fates of Afghans who helped the U.S. during its war in Afghanistan have been in limbo after President Trump signed an executive order suspending the U.S. refugee resettlement program. Joining me now is Shawn VanDiver. He is the head of AfghanEvac, and he has been following all of this. Of course, there's the executive orders, there's the elimination of the temporary protected status. You're not from D.C. You are here trying to get some meetings. Let's start by just talking about what the situation is for our Afghan allies who helped us during the war on terror. Where do things stand for them right now?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me on. Scripps has always been following this story so closely, and we really appreciate it. Look, over the last 4 years, AfghanEvac and other groups worked with the last administration to build out Enduring Welcome, which is the safest, most secure legal immigration pathway our country has ever seen. On day one, President Trump and Stephen Miller shut it all the way down. Now, after day one, they appointed a woman named Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Afghanistan, Mary Bishoping, to be in charge of Afghanistan policy for the United States government. We thought that was a good thing because she led the effort to investigate the withdrawal, but it turns out she's out there advocating for things like sending all of the Afghans that are remaining at Camp Asaliya and Qatar back to Afghanistan, sending women and children back. More than half of the 1,450 people there are women and children, and they face certain death if they head back to Afghanistan. Here at home, they're being snatched up by ICE. And what we need is for President Trump and the Trump administration to continue keeping the commitments that veterans and service members and other diplomats made to our wartime allies. We don't have that many left to get out, and they could finish the job during this term.
It was back in May that the announcement first came from, I think it was Homeland Security, that the end of temporary protected status was going to happen in July. Some court battles. It recently just ended. In the past few days, what have you heard from some of those people most directly impacted about it?
Sure. So for the folks that are here at home, they're generally here if they haven't adjusted status to lawful permanent resident, or they haven't been granted asylum. They're here under humanitarian parole or temporary protected status. And the way that you differentiate is TPS is for people who are already here. That has ended, so they no longer have those protections. They no longer have the ability to work if that's all that they had. If you've applied for asylum, you still get to see that through. But this impacts nearly 10,000 Afghans. And the truth is that the administration is not doing a lot to communicate what their policy is because they don't know. In fact, just last week, or in the last couple of weeks, they had a meeting at the White House, and the due-outs for that deputies committee meeting aren't even due until October. So Deputy Assistant Secretary of State Mary Bishoping has until October to say what the administration's policy is on Afghanistan. But in the meantime, they've deconstructed everything. They're kicking people out because they're ending TPS and humanitarian parole. They're stopping people from coming here. SIV has a narrow exception, but the infrastructure to help them get here has been killed.
And you mentioned ICE and their sort of involvement with some of these Afghan refugees. What have you seen in terms of ICE enforcement for these?
So we recently launched an initiative called Battle Buddies, which helps service members and veterans stand with our wartime allies. And the impetus for that decision, that program launch, was that ICE started snatching up our wartime allies who had followed all the rules and were just going to their normal court dates or immigration appointments. So folks, your viewers can go to AfghanEvac.org/Battle Buddies. They can sign up to be a Battle Buddy. They can tell us about court dates or immigration appointments they have coming up, or they can make a donation to AfghanEvac, and that will help us continue our work fighting for this, because ICE is not treating these people with dignity and respect, and at the very least that we can do is stand shoulder to shoulder with those folks who stood shoulder to shoulder with us.
And obviously there's the Afghans who are currently in the U.S., but you hit on many others who are around the world right now who kind of are in limbo. What are some of the experiences that they are going through?
Look, there are Afghans in 90 countries around the world, and the State Department is tracking all of them. They're in the Refugee Pathway or the SIV/Consular Pathway, which means because of President Trump's executive order he signed on day one, Executive Order 14163, ending or pausing indefinitely the refugee program, means they're waiting in limbo. And it's just that. That's what's killing people, right, is they don't know what to expect. So we are calling on the president, we're calling on the cabinet, and we're calling on Congress to make clear their intentions, to take meetings with Afghans, to take meetings with AfghanEvac and other organizations and tell us what their plan is. They ran on this. They talked about it over and over, and still they just don't seem to have the courage to tell us what's going on. And these people deserve better. They stood with us during our time of war.
So haven't had a ton of success yet with the Trump administration during your visit, at least this time in D.C. What about Congress, Capitol Hill? Is this a partisan issue? What sort of reaction are you seeing from
This is a nonpartisan issue. I just came from the Hill. I met with Republicans. I met with Democrats. We've got some staunch supporters from both sides of the aisle and in both houses. I work with a group of more than 450 offices that we've been briefing since September of 2021, and it's the most bipartisan, bicameral thing I've ever seen. And I wouldn't say that I haven't had success with the Trump administration, because a lot of their people are talking to me behind the scenes. They just don't have the courage to talk to us officially.
Okay, got it. All right. All right, so just to wrap up here, what is your message, not just for the administration, but to folks who have been watching at home, seeing a lot of headlines, aren't really keeping up with this? Just kind of, what is your message to them, or how can they help if they're interested?
Sure. Folks, if you're at home and you're watching and you're learning more about this, please go to AfghanEvac.org, donate to us, call your members of Congress, call your local representatives, and tell them how much this matters to you.
All right, Shawn VanDiver, he's the head of AfghanEvac. Shawn, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.